Welcome everyone. Kia ora koutou ko, Victoria McLennan Tokawenga. Please call me Vic, and welcome to everyone who's joined this webinar today. Apologies if there was some confusion about the start time. I see someone saying that it was meant to start at 12. The recording will be made available, as it always is, for all of our webinars after the event. So really appreciate you all joining me, and welcome to Karaitiana, who's here to speak with us today for this fireside chat. Kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora, thank you.
Thanks for coming along and talking about this really diverse range of topics, and I'm quite excited about our discussion. But first up, why don't you tell us a little bit of your potted history and background, what led you to having such an interest in these really interesting topics such as digital ethics and Māori data sovereignty and the like. So tell us a bit about you first.
Okay, sure. So I guess my interest there was a pathway created for me growing up. So I had my grandparent, I had two sets of grandparents who I spent most of my childhood with. One set of the grandparents were very staunch in Te Ao Māori. They were fluent speakers of the language, fully immersed in marae. They had very traditional values. Then my other set of grandparents, a World War II veteran. My grandmother was very ladylike, so I got a really good balance of two different perspectives of the world. So I think, that taught me, and also being brought up in a rural North Canterbury town, being a Caucasian-looking Māori, certainly taught me a lot about, about fairness and equality and people's perceptions. So, so then just fast forwarding, I started in the IT industry in the 1990s. My first job was with a startup who basically said, look, we don't need, we can't find anyone who's got any computer skills. We were happy to train you up with everything that we need. We just need someone who can, help out, who can speak Māori, who can help us in the area. So like, oh, yep. I was, out of high school, wasn't too sure what I was going to do. I'd kind of had to go at studying law, realized that wasn't me. And so, so I joined the IT industry then. But after, it didn't take very long for me to feel really uncomfortable about what I was doing. And then I suddenly realized that I was actually taking Māori knowledge, giving it to this startup company, and the startup company was then selling it back to Māori. Mm-hmm. And that made me feel really uncomfortable. And so I guess, there was the genesis of my career now, where after a number of years working for that startup company, I did a stint in government, stint in academia, a stint in the IT department at a university. I decided to go out on my own. Specializing in DTDT with IT, data sovereignty, and with ethics. So I've managed to combine them all together to create a niche for myself. That's a quick introduction of myself.
Yeah, I love that that epiphany and how that kind of shaped your purpose in life. And so many people that I meet have those kind of moments. So it's really special, and thank you for sharing that. So let's kick us off by talking about AI, and I've got a few questions about AI because it's such a hot topic. Mm-hmm. And I know you've delved deeply into this space, and I know you've been speaking a lot about AI recently. So good to kind of capture your thoughts. So what was your first reaction when generative AI tools like ChatGPT exploded into the public domain?
I guess there was probably a few expletives, but I was like, gosh, this is like appeared, I thought probably 10 years sooner than what I'd expected and what my colleagues were talking about occurring. So then it was like, well, I had all these fears of cultural appropriation, a lot of fears which were, they haven't played out yet, but I see that they're starting to play out. I also thought back to a number of AI engineers and academics that I've worked with over the years. I reached out to them. They were equally well, yeah, equally shocked that it happened so quickly, but at the same time, they still said, well, we're still a long way off general artificial intelligence, and sort of, which made me feel a little bit better. But then my mind, I went from all the bad things which I thought about to thought, right, how do we grasp this now? This is everybody's on an equal footing here. How does Māori, how do minority communities, how do we use this technology that's available now, and how do we adapt and move forward with it? So yeah, and I guess that was my first initial reactions. My other reactions were, look, we've spent the last 8 or 9 years talking about sovereign Māori data sovereignty. That's just we have to put that aside now. We have to start talking about Māori sovereignty with artificial intelligence now. So yeah, I was quite busy to start with. Oh, actually, I've been busy ever since, I think, raising issues, talking about the benefits. I mean, a lot of the talks I do aren't in public; they're at marae with whānau, trying to deal with other people's misconceptions about AI. So a lot of them are that we're going to have killer robots, that they'll be racist against Māori, that will have different, the New Zealand police will be replaced by robots. A lot of things which aren't going to happen. We're not in the near future. And personally, I don't think it will happen here, but I guess anything's possible.
Well, we've all watched Terminator movies, right? So
yes.
that's
yeah,
that's where you leap to.
Yes. And I was surprised at how many young people have watched Terminator and other sci-fi movies and immediately, come up with these conclusions. I also, I guess, probably another thought I actually had too, when I first heard about ChatGPT, was that it took me back to when I first started off in IT. My kaumātua and lots of my family told me not to get into IT. They just said, look, it's a Pākehā tool. This is just paraphrasing. It's evil. It'll take away our culture. It'll take away our values. It'll it'll be evil essentially. And so so I thought, well, we need to combat those issues now as well, and make sure that we still don't have generations talking like that. But it's definitely interesting times.
No, it's fantastic that you can have those grassroots conversations. So thank you for sharing that with us. So before we talk about sovereignty, which is going to be a big part of our discussion today, I just want to ask you, in what ways do you think AI is challenging or reinforcing, as you've just said, the opportunity is there, the dominant cultural narratives both here in Aotearoa and across the world?
Yeah, so I guess unfortunately we've become consumers of American culture, and that's being dominated through artificial intelligence. So initially, in the first year or so, when ChatGPT became the household name, so to speak, ChatGPT would say a lot of racist things. So one was, I tested it quite a bit, and it told me the Māori creation story it basically gave me all this text in Māori. And as I started reading, I was like, this is starting to sound really familiar, and it's not our creation story. And then I realized it was actually just a translation of the King James Bible, the book of Genesis. And that was being touted as being a Māori traditional story. And so, and then it produced a lot of incorrect statistics, or incorrect details about Māori. It was misogynist. It was very disturbing. And then it still mixes up people, which is also a concern. Could definitely see, the American views coming through. There weren't New Zealand views coming through with a lot of things there. So I think, we do run that risk of only being AI consumers as opposed to AI developers and AI leaders. I think another common narrative that I see is don't use DeepSeek. It's not American. And then I argue and question that. It's like, well, we've got two superpowers who probably do the same things in different ways. Should we not just treat them both the same? Yeah, I mean, and we're definitely seeing American cultural influence through. We've seen it through music for decades. Our youth, who are probably adults now, the way they dress, we're seeing that influence coming through. Spelling is probably another good example.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Yep. We've got children who don't know how to spell New Zealand English. It's always American English. I think it's definitely we're being impacted everywhere, but at the same time, I think this opens up new opportunities for us. For New Zealand to actually say, well, we're a tiny country down the bottom of the world. What can we do about this? But I think we need leaders to lead that conversation.
Yeah, so it's a great point. We've got some questions coming into the Q&A, so I'm just going to ask you the first one, which is from Rob. He says, not Terminator style, but folks will try to replace workers with AI agents, especially with the MCP protocol allowing agents to work together. And all the big tech are prioritizing humanoid robots with LLMs. What's your view on folks being replaced replaced as workers with AI agents? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so I think there's a place for AI agents, and I think we'd be foolish thinking that it won't happen. I also see there's an opportunity here that we can create new jobs. There was some research came out earlier this year, which highlighted a number of jobs which will likely be replaced by AI agents. So we've got a lot of the administration work. There's a lot of manual skills will be replaced. So I think this is our opportunity to say, well, we know it's happening. It's going to get worse. It's going to increase. So why don't we create new training opportunities in AI? Why don't we basically look at our education system and prepare students, our future workforce, for the AI taking over those jobs. From a Te Ao Māori perspective, I see it's going to be a big culture shock. A lot of Māori who are brought up in Te Ao Māori prefer the face-to-face conversation. I mean, it's taken, I think it took COVID for many Māori organisations to use online video chat. Prior to COVID, I'd never heard of a marae hui being held online before. And in fact, I was told I was dreaming if I wanted to ever set up an online meeting with the iwi or the marae. And now everybody does it. It's just, we've just adapted. And I think that we will eventually adapt. I think it's also important that we don't hide the fact AI agents are taking those human jobs, and we just need to be honest and talk to those people in those jobs and say, yes, this is happening, and whether businesses can create other opportunities or I think we just need to be open about that.
Yeah, well, there's a really nice follow-up question to that just coming from Damon, who says, working in the health environment, we see a current state where the workforce demand is outstripped by demand, and AI is seen as a way to support those workforce demands. And he goes on to say, obviously, privacy, ethics, and ethnicity considerations need to be part of the conversation here. What could or should be the right vehicle to support a way of complementing the workforce shortfalls with AI appropriately?
Yeah, so I think firstly, New Zealand needs to be the AI leaders and create those AI agents. And it's important that we have the community input. So again, from a Te Ao Māori perspective, we should be having Māori at the full life cycle of any AI agent, and making sure it's as appropriate as possible for Te Ao Māori. I just think back a few years ago, I think it may have been Air New Zealand had an avatar of a person, which was yeah, I'm not sure what they were trying to do, but I mean that was ended up being offensive to a number of different cultures. We had an automated system with one of the New Zealand's larger banks, and it couldn't pronounce Māori names, and it made some faux pas. Again, if we had Māori in that design process, in the life cycle, none of that would have happened. But then I mean, it's not just Māori. I mean, we need to consider our Pacifica peoples, our disability communities, LGBTQ plus communities. I mean, we're a very diverse country, and we need to have all those humans in place, making sure that there's an ethical, the ethics and fairness is there. I think also, yeah, and I think, yeah, just making, yeah, I think, yeah, having the humans at the full cycle of the AI is definitely a really good start.
Ivan's got a really specific question about Microsoft, whether you've got any views on that and the integration of the Māori dictionary into Microsoft Office, except for Teams, and his frustration that Copilot transcripts still aren't particularly good with Te Reo Māori, and the fact that Te Reo Māori isn't able to be utilised or effectively in Teams. Do you know anything about what Microsoft have done in that space and integrating Te Reo Māori at all?
Sure, I can speak to this on a bigger picture view. So the Māori language is still being trained with AI, so it's not going to be perfect to start with. What we have seen, we've seen the language from when ChatGPT first came out, it couldn't translate Te Reo Māori properly at all. And then end of last year, I was speaking to some Māori translators and linguists, and they expressed fear that the AI in 2 years has got the state of the language translation up to a reasonably good level. But they noticed that it has some dialects which aren't human. So I suspect in another couple of years we will see Te Reo Māori and AI being as good as an average speaker, if not better, perhaps even as good as a native speaker. There is a lot of pushback in that area from some parts of Māoridom. These are people who have invested a lot of time and a lot of money to learning the language. They've got businesses that will be impacted, and it's a whole cultural shift that needs to occur, where you traditionally you'd go and learn to speak Māori in a group, face to face, physically. We've recently gone to the online, and now we're going to this black box, which most people don't know about. So I mean, but for me, I think it's positive. I was brought up, in the days when you couldn't learn, you still couldn't learn, you couldn't speak Māori in public. Your grandparents made sure you never spoke outside of the house. You couldn't learn to speak at school. The TV, the news was just, it was, dark times. So I think this is positive that AI is being used to promote Te Reo Māori and make it better for us all.
Oh, great. So let's talk a little bit about data. You just introduced my thought process here on fundamentally this is all about data, and people say that data is the new oil. What should we be focusing on from that kind of AI data perspective?
Yeah, so I think we need to be focusing on ensuring that New Zealand data is in the control of New Zealand. I think we need to be, as a government and as private companies, we need to be doing stock takes on where our data is, what data we do have, and then trying to address any biases in that data. I think we need to update a lot of data strategies I've seen need to be updated to reflect the technological changes with artificial intelligence. I think, I think we also need to start looking at, what countries our data's in, how that impacts on our legal rights to that data. I think we need to start looking at categorizing data, based on our own society. And I'm also, one of the people advocating that we need our own New Zealand sovereign AI And I think the economic benefits, would be substantial. We've had some AI infrastructure experts, quote $40 million to create an New Zealand AI system. I mean, it would be great to have an economist do the numbers on the financial benefits. And but yeah, so I think we need to be really careful about data. Probably, I think it'd be good to start talking to people about all of our data on social media, where that goes. Our people who use Gmail or other cloud emails. I think we need to start having some very serious conversations. And then, of course, intellectual property rights are our data. We've seen just in the maybe last couple of weeks, I think, we've seen OpenAI consume a whole lot of books, from LibGen. And there's a substantial amount of New Zealand books were incorporated into that. And just, again, there's, those companies don't care about intellectual property rights. They just go and, so I think we just need to be careful about what we do digitize. And it's also the same message I tell, whānau at the marae is like, our mātauranga Māori, our Māori knowledge, we have to be careful where we share that now. Because if we're going to put it online, it will end up in an AI eventually. So, but again, I also see the positive side of this is we've had generations of our people leave our villages, go to the cities, and they can learn everything online now. So we don't get to know who they are, and they don't get to learn all those cultural nuances. And so this is an opportunity for us to say, well, hey, come back home, and yeah, you can learn this, but yeah, don't put it on YouTube or share it. And I think, the same thing we should be doing with all data.
Yeah, great answer. One of the and I love some of the terms you've introduced, so I'll dig into them in a minute. But one of the questions on the message board from Reinhardt is, what's your view on synthetic data, artificially generated data, and the opportunities or challenges it brings in a New Zealand context, specifically around ethical considerations?
Yeah, so my experience with synthetic data is it's usually biased. It causes more problems than what it's worth. But again, I think if we have wide community representation checking that data first, then I think it's fine. But in my years in academia, it's not what I've seen. I've seen synthetic data being based upon biased data, and so it's just creating more and more biased data.
And you and I were both involved in a panel a couple of panels a couple of weeks ago around digital access for those with disabilities, and that was a question, wasn't it, around how do we collectively train these LLMs to understand the needs of those with disabilities in a global context, so that those who might most benefit from use of the AI are actually reflected in there. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we just need to look at America, where our technology comes from, and I think it's well known fact that it's traditionally white men who have some sort of a certain level of privilege in life are leading, developing these technologies. It's older white men who are funding these developments. And so, I think it's a good lesson that we need to diversify our tech leadership in New Zealand. We need to, just reevaluate our reliance on American technologies. But I mean, too much of our tech is based on at least a Western-dominated view. It's definitely not. There's no Indigenous perspectives there. But I'm sure other ethnicities will probably say the same thing. So
yeah, quite a challenge for everyone from any minority group, right, to ensure that their voice and their role is reflected in the responses from these tools. I'm going to ask you a completely randomly different question now, or a couple of them from the message board. Rob is an American relocating permanently. He says that in caps, by the way, to your beautiful country, and is a cybersecurity consultant. He has asked, it sounds to me like Māori prefer face-to-face interactions, so New Zealand will be more apt to prefer human workers over AI agents in the coming years, or at least take longer than the US. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, yeah, many Māori do prefer face-to-face, but I mean, the Māori also prefer relationships with human beings. So, but at the same time, we are a minority. Well, we're what, 19% of the population. We don't have a strong voice in digital. I think we make up, I think, is it 7 or 8% of the digital workforce?
Yep. 7. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Yep. So we don't really have a voice. We don't have a united voice either, despite we have significant political influence, economic influence. We contribute a lot to the economy, but we don't have a united voice. So I don't think that will impact too much on AI agents.
And that's an interesting reflection on the united voice. I feel that way about our tech sector as a whole. We don't have a united voice. You go overseas and you pick up a wine bottle from New Zealand, it'll have NZ wine sticker on it. We don't have that same sort of the whole tech sector coalescing and being on the same page. So yeah, we've got some fundamental interesting quirks that Rob will discover when he arrives here.
Yes.
Other questions from the message board. Sasha is asking, are there any AI developers working on cultural component models that you know of?
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of work going into guidelines to be culturally appropriate AI. There's a group of academics looking at health protocols with AI, and stringing through to TDT through there. There's current guidelines for the public sector, which includes TDT and a Te Ao Māori perspective. I think there's a lot of guides coming out. In terms of the actual culturally competent AI, there is a developer who has created an AI system. I'm not familiar with the technology he's used, but he's based it on tikanga Māori and on one of the Chinese religious beliefs. I've just forgotten which one it is now. But so he's written about it on LinkedIn, and he's published a paper which I've yet to read. So from what I know, that's the only culturally safe, actually designed AI system.
That's a great answer and great to know. I think I'll move to talking about sovereignty now, because it's, we've got 15 minutes left and I think it'll probably take up the rest of that time. I'm just looking at the different questions, which we will get to. First of all, Chris has posed a question. What do you think a New Zealand sovereign AI model would look like? Our own open source model trained on New Zealand data, or do you have a sense of how much investment this would be? And you'd said some people have quoted 40 million. Would we be able to leverage open source models, e.g. Llama or DeepSeek, he's saying, or would we need to start from scratch? So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think, we should be looking at an open source AI, sovereign AI. But of course, I mean, it would never be 100% sovereign. I mean, we'd still be reliant on computer chips from around the world and, minerals which we can't access. But I would see it being like a partnership between government, businesses, and communities. And with all the economic benefits that could come from it, I think it would have to be like an advisory board, some sort of formal structure, some sort of oversight. I haven't thought through properly how that could happen. I also know that there's a lot of iwi and hapu and marae wanting their own sovereign AIs for in-house, or so that they can use it for themselves. And so we've got a couple of companies using open source technologies who are setting that up for them. And my understanding is that they are using DeepSeek for that. Again, I mean, I've forgotten the application now, but I mean, you can download a free application and just run AI on your own laptop or your own computers. So, I see that happening a lot as well. But in terms of national AI, I think, there's probably a lot of deep discussions that need to be had to get that right.
I don't know if you were involved in it, but I remember in the 90s there were discussions about, when the internet was a thing, about New Zealand having its own kind of walled garden approach to storing our data and making it accessible. So do you see that we could be, what would the keys to success need to be for us to achieve an outcome like a New Zealand sovereign or a Māori sovereign AI environment here?
Yeah, I think the biggest key to success would be not being reliant on another country for our own infrastructure, for our own hosting and AI. And I think the recent geopolitical changes that we've seen should be an eye-opener for everybody. But, 2 years ago, saying something, talking about a sovereign AI in New Zealand, would be ridiculous. But I think now there's some serious risks for all New Zealanders. For Māori, I think it's achievable. At a much smaller scale, we could do that, but whether there's the appetite to go out on our own, I don't know, and I don't think so. I think there's too many independent voices and groups for that. But again, for me, I'd see the success as being economic success and creating a knowledge economy within our own country, where we can grow our own people and financial successes.
Yeah. In just the last few days with the tariff announcements, not announcements, they make you think really hard about, is this a New Zealand product when it's got componentry that's coming from all sorts of different countries to be assembled here potentially in a physical product, and the same with our software products. So do you think it feels like we've got quite a long way to go to sort of figure out what a sovereign solution might look like? Is that your thinking?
Yes, most definitely. Yes. But I think, we need to be talking about it. We need to start thinking about it. And, it's like when Microsoft Windows became the dominant player in New Zealand, everyone had Microsoft Windows on their computers, or the old, Microsoft Office, I think it was called back then, or Microsoft Word, etc., etc. And yet, so for Māori, we couldn't actually write macrons on computers. And so, it's all those little things which you don't think about until you've actually got someone else's system. And so I think, we in New Zealand, we're dealing with significant online harms, like bullying, deep fakes. So I think, there's a huge amount of discussions to be had about a sovereign system in New Zealand.
A question I've been dying to ask you since I posed the question to you of, would you join me for this webinar? Māori data sovereignty is also often talked about, and often talked about at a really high level. What does it really look like in practice for an organisation holding Māori data?
Sure. So the first issue that I've seen with many government departments and businesses is identifying what is Māori data. So I think identifying what it is, then applying labels to it, so that you can find it in your whatever systems you're using, so you can identify it, and then just be working with Māori organisations, whether you're holding health data or land data. And there's all this data that can be, could be shared back with iwi, with Māori organisations. I think at a high level, or a more practical level too, I think having relationships with Māori organisations, and it's a relationship that works both ways, where your business can get benefits and you can give benefits back to Māori organisations, and that will in turn will empower communities, whether it's financially, health, social. Yeah, I think I think that's probably some key messages there for businesses. But I'd also suggest that Pacific data is and disabled data is just as important. The only difference is that Māori data has been identified as a taonga under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So asking also by businesses could ask Māori communities, well, we have this data, Māori data, how should we best utilize it, for example? Can you help us get rid of the bias in that data? I think, just working in partnerships with organizations. But it's also really important not to just work with any Māori organisation, and also if you have Māori staff, please don't just rely on your Māori staff member to be the expert. I see it all the time, Māori staff members suffer burnout because they're supposed to be the expert on everything in Māori, despite the fact they may not have even been brought up in the Māori world. So I think, keeping an open mind on that.
That is something I hear so consistently from your colleagues and peers, and so good to reinforce that point. A couple more questions from the Q&A. So Harley is asking and saying, again, not Terminator style, but generative AI is currently finding its way into physical and traditional person-to-person settings through tools such as real-time translations, transcriptions on your smartphones, sometimes as a convenience, in other cases as assistive technology. This often includes sending sensitive raw data, such as voice recordings, to an offshore provider. How do we balance this usage with considerations around data sovereignty and privacy? It's a good question.
Yeah, well, that's a big question. So I think, there's the convenience, but again, from a Te Ao Māori perspective, I think it's important to use our traditional knowledge to point out the risks with this. So you mentioned voice recordings. So our traditional knowledge talks about the dangers of giving your voice to someone else. And so it basically talks about the voice being contained within a seashell and being used for bad things. So I think, from a Te Ao Māori perspective, we should be using traditional knowledge to create warnings for Te Ao Māori. I think we need to be having conversations about the real risks. All of us should be having those conversations. It's not Terminator talk by saying, someone can use your voice recording to, recreate your voice. And we've seen it happen before. Add that to a deep fake, and there's a whole lot of issues there. So again, I think if we had a sovereign system in New Zealand, we could avoid a lot of this. But also, a lot of people also say to me, they're like, especially at the marae, they're like, "Cuz, they can have my voice. Who am I? No one knows who I am. I don't care." But it's it's not always that simple. So there's just I think there's so many different agencies and parts of the community who need to have these conversations. It's but it is a risk that we need to consider.
And that's for the one individual saying, "Who am I?" But when you look at that across a whole generation, that's or multiple generations, it's quite a powerful thing to be concerned about.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you a privacy question, which is around the government recently consulted on facial recognition under the Privacy Act biometrics program. What are your thoughts in that space?
So we do know that facial recognition is biased against people of colour. And so, there's plenty of research in America about that. And we do know it doesn't work properly in New Zealand. So we have the woman in Rotorua supermarket, Tiani Solomon, who was misidentified through both the technology and the human staff. And that's had a dramatic impact on her personal life, to the fact, last time I spoke to her, she was too scared to go to a supermarket again. So we know it doesn't pick up properly on Māori Pacifica faces. The foodstuffs trial, by the numbers, I mean, Consumer NZ ran the numbers and believed there was more than one false hit there. The Privacy Commission haven't come out publicly telling us the results of that yet. DIA run an internal test of facial recognition technology, and that report showed there was biases against Māori, and it also alluded to the fact that any Māori with a moho, a facial tattoo, could probably have some issues as well. So I think that as New Zealanders, we need to be cautious about facial recognition technology. We need more Māori voice, more Pacifica voices, people of colour voices in here. Part of me thinks, well, should we just have a whole New Zealand data set to train on? There's pros and cons there. I mean, we've already got photos from driver's licenses and passports we could use, for example, and start trying to work out those biases. But yeah, I do fear that we're going to see a lot of innocent Māori Pacifica people being targeted. If based on the numbers, I mean, the North Island supermarket chains have picked up maybe 6 false hits. What's that going to look like if we roll it out everywhere? So very concerned.
Yeah, and we could have a whole session on that alone. And I realise that we haven't even really touched on ethics, and we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to ask you the last couple of questions from the message board. One is from Mike, who's asking whether you've been following the Facebook whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams and the Senate hearing yesterday. Is that a good thing to ask you a question about, or have you not been following that one?
No, I'm only just aware of some of the basic details. I was more worried about the Treaty Principles Bill yesterday.
Yeah, fair enough too. Well, how about we'll let you go away and research that, and maybe when you and I have a follow-up on that, we can talk about that one. Okay. Brian has to talk of this kōrero and said he's really glad to hear it. What Brian says is, I firmly believe that the onus on us as Māori is to make the most of our data for our benefit. How can we best build capacity to best take advantage of that in the short, medium and longer term?
Yep. I think we need to start talking about data. We need to offer opportunities for more Māori to get into the digital area. Our iwi need to look at digital as a career for our people instead of farming and forestry and fishing. We also know the research tells us when Māori when they get into digital jobs and into corporates, it becomes really culturally unsafe and they want to leave. So we need to look at how we create a more inclusive environment for everybody, and for Māori, to answer your question.
Thank you, and I think thanks, Brian, for contributing that thinking. So we're at the end, and I just wanted to ask you one final thing, really, which is, I know that you're really passionate about this kaupapa that we've been discussing today. So what's one thing that you'd like everyone who's listening to this or watching this to know or do or change in their lives or go out and learn more about?
Sure. Yeah, I think just be more open-minded. I mean, we have a diverse community. I think if you learn more about Te Tiriti and our own history here in New Zealand, I think would be some really good steps to going forward. Learn about data sovereignty and Māori data sovereignty, and I think if you have Māori staff, just please be really conscious of the fact that they may not be experts. And if you rely on them all the time, please give them benefits, pay rises, etc.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks for joining us today and sharing your insight. If people want to follow you, they can find you on LinkedIn, I assume?
Yeah, yes, definitely on LinkedIn, yes.
I see you post quite a bit of content on there, which is great for people to follow. I might ask you to come back in the future and let's just talk about ethics, because we didn't even really get to any of that discussion.
Sure.
So thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Thanks to everyone who joined us to watch today. Great questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but fantastic to hear from everyone. And I'll say ka kite.